Welcome to the DKMS World Blood Cancer Day Roundtable. Every 35 seconds, someone is diagnosed with a blood cancer around the globe. I'm Rob Boyle, your moderator for this roundtable. I'm also a weekend reporter and award-winning podcast host. It's a pleasure to be in your company today. In observance of World Blood Cancer Day this year, DKMS is hosting the first ever roundtable to stand in solidarity with blood cancer patients and their families all over the world. We've covered many stories about bone marrow donation, so being a part of this milestone event is an honor. For many patients fighting blood cancers, a bone marrow or blood stem cell transplant is their last hope at a healthy life. Today, you will get to know the key players involved in the journey of transplantation. Each perspective will be different as it affects not only donors and patients, but several others in the healthcare space. Please welcome Cody Strahl. He's a DKMS bone marrow donor. Kevin Clements. He's a cancer survivor. Dr. Felix Mensah. He's a transplant hematologist and oncologist at the Indiana Blood Marrow and Transplantation, San Franciscan Health, Indianapolis, Indiana. Katherine Smalling, she's a nurse and hematopoietic coordinator and neuroblastoma coordinator. And Snehna Agrova, she is a donor recruiter and bone marrow donor. So let's get right to it, guys. Why would someone need a bone marrow transplant? We'll give it to you, Dr.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for having me on this roundtable. I'm really excited to be here and meet all of you and to be able to discuss all this important disease and the way we try to save a patient's life. So bone marrow transplantation, all transplantation of hematopoietic stem cells usually involves transplant of stem cells from one person to another person, otherwise called allogeneic hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. Hematopoietic stem cells actually give rise to other blood cells through a process called hematopoiesis, and this usually occurs in the red bone marrow. So a small number of hematopoietic stem cells can actually end up generating a very large number of daughter hematopoietic stem cells, and this is the principle or the phenomenon that we actually exploit in bone marrow transplantation, where some cells from an individual is given to another person to reconstitute the hematopoietic stem cells in a patient with blood cancer because that process is faulty in that particular individual. Bone marrow transplantation is used to treat patients with a variety of cancers, blood cancers like acute leukemias, like AML, ALL, myelodysplastic syndromes, some of the chronic leukemias like chronic myeloid leukemia and chronic lymphocytic leukemia, as well as some lymphomas. Now, this is not limited to leukemias alone, as we also use it to treat non-cancerous bone marrow disorders, such as bone marrow failure syndromes, including severe aplastic anemia, Diamond-Blackfan's, Fanconi's. We have neuroblastoma, also autoimmune disorders and inborn errors of metabolism. So historically, this was offered to patients with blood cancers where they really have no other treatment options, and eligibility was based mainly on whether the patient was in adequate physical condition or not. Today, a decision to perform a bone marrow transplant includes assessing the underlying disease, whether the transplant is likely to offer better results than other standards of care, mainly non-transplant options, and also looking at the risk of morbidity and mortality that is associated with the whole process of allogeneic transplant in order to make a decision.
So what happens when somebody needs a bone marrow transplant to save their lives? What happens next? You get this diagnosis, and then Snehna, tell us what would be the next step.
Yeah, so working on the DKMS patient engagement team, we work very closely with the DKMS marketing team to ensure that we're doing everything in our power to register more potential donors so that there is a matching donor for that patient in the registry. So I think oftentimes people think that if you are in need of a transplant, that you'll likely have a family member that would be a matching donor for you. But 70% of patients actually rely on registries like DKMS and people like you and me to step up and donate. So we do a lot to educate and create awareness within communities around the United States and around the world so that people know that they have the opportunity to swab their cheek, be part of the registry, and potentially save somebody's life.
Yeah, so Cody, you're somebody who saved somebody's life. You're a donor. So tell me, what was that like for you?
It's an incredible experience. Words can't really explain what it's like, especially when it happens as quickly as it does. When I first swabbed, I was a sophomore in college at a father's weekend event. We had a speaker come to the house, and he spoke with us all about leukemia and stem cell transplants and bone marrow. And in the moment, you take the Q-tip and you put it in your mouth, and you put it in the envelope, and they send it off, and you never think about it. It becomes nothing, and you just did something, And 3 years later was when I got a phone call right before I graduated from college, saying that I was a potential match with somebody. And when you go back, 3 years to when I did the swab, you don't really ever think about actually receiving a phone call, and then all of a sudden it's there, and that was a big moment. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't tell any of my friends or family. I just kind of kept it to myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. Actually went on a trip with some friends, and on that trip we did something kind of similar where someone came and spoke with us about stem cell transplants, bone marrow. And one of my friends, they asked, does anybody know someone who has gone through the process? And one of my friends says, well, we don't know who it was, but we had someone test, someone was a match, and we don't know who it is, but someone from our organization is a match.
That's awesome. And Kevin, what's it like for you being a cancer survivor to know there's people like Cody that are willing to step up and make a difference and save somebody's life?
Pretty fantastic. I'll tell you, going through that whole process, it was a very terrifying experience, as you can all probably imagine. You go through this gamut of emotions. It's like this roller coaster of emotions. And when I was first diagnosed back in October of 2019, it was a complete and total shock to me. I was healthy. I was swimming. I was actually getting in shape to swim in some masters competitions. And I would say that I was probably the healthiest I was throughout my adult life. I used to swim professionally back in the early 2000s, and went to the U.S. Olympic trials in 2000, went to the trials again in 2004, and was a hopeful to make the Olympic team back then. And, fast forward to 2019, I was just getting back in the water again, swimming, and I was in really good shape, very healthy. And then all of a sudden, it just hit me. And it was literally about a 2-week stint of me being sick before I was diagnosed. And so everything just flooded and came in so quickly that I really didn't have time to think. To know that there's people out there that are willing to save another person's life, to get on that registry is really a godsend. I mean, I went through the process of DKMS. I did my own bone marrow drives, and we were able to add another 3,500 people to the database, which is fantastic, and I'm hopeful that more people will come on board. I think this database is fantastic. I think that getting on this registry is something that we need to definitely raise awareness for.
Yep.
Something to what Cody and Kevin just said. And Cody, thank you for being a donor. Thank you, Sneha, as well. So I think there's a lot of misconception in society that, oh, they're going to take some organs of me, and I'm never going to get it back, and what if I need my own later, and what's going to happen to me? But today we most of the time use peripheral blood stem cells that are mobilized, and you basically give it as if you're donating blood. So you're not in the operating room, and nobody is like, taking organs out of you. It's just a needle in your arm that is, just taking the blood out. We run it through a machine, and then we collect the stem cells that are needed, return the rest of the blood to you. Okay, so it goes back into you. And then somebody would ask, but what happens to my stem cells? They'll all get finished. No, actually, your stem cells are capable of self-renewal. So any amount that is left, which is a lot, are able to actually self-renew within you, and you replenish your stores just like you replenish your red blood cells after you go to the Red Cross and you donate to them and you replenish. So nobody's taking a big organ out of you, and nobody's ripping things out of you. It's just like a blood donation most of the time. I have to add though, in a few cases, sometimes bone marrow stem cells are required, and these are for very specific conditions where actually the bone marrow cells are taken directly from the marrow space, and that one sometimes requires going to the operating room where we give you some moderate sedation, and then we harvest the stem cells from your bone marrow. But those are rare. Those are not the most common types. The very common ones are the ones that we take out from the peripheral blood, like a blood donation. So again, thank you, Cody, for stepping up.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that there's 11 million people registered, but there's billions of people in the world. So we need more people to step up. And Katherine, I mean, you've probably seen young children get saved. Just tell us a little bit about your role in this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's interesting from the perspective of a pediatric patient, which there's far fewer than the adult patients in the world who need a transplant, but there are a significant number, and their transplant experience is a little different. Oftentimes, they will have a sibling donor if they're lucky, and so when a patient is referred to the transplant team, they actually come to me first as the coordinator. I look at their donor options, and so I'll type out them and any siblings that they may have to see first if a sibling can be a donor. And if they are, then we get that set up through our facility. If we do not have a usable full match sibling, then we will look in the registry to see if there's someone else out there who could be a match for that patient. And then I coordinate that process. So I look down that list. I use certain criteria to see who would be the best donor for that patient. And then I request them to be contacted, like Cody was contacted, to send in extra typing to confirm that they are truly a match. And then I guide the patient through the process. Kevin, you probably had a coordinator that helped you set up your pre-evaluations and make sure you had a calendar for everything you were going to be doing and all of that. And that was me. And for with pediatric patients, speaking to Dr. Mensa's point, we are those rare exceptions that we prefer a bone marrow product over a peripheral blood product. In the majority of our patients, they just respond better. The kids respond better to a bone marrow product. So we do request that from most of our donors, related and unrelated. Not every time, but most of the time for our pediatric patients. And so oftentimes I have to do education with a sibling donor about what that means. Recently I had a young sibling who was very scared, crying, just beside themselves, willing to donate, but they thought they had to give up a bone, an entire bone to be a donor. And so we had to, explain that wasn't the case, that they would just go to sleep, they would wake up, they would feel maybe a little tired, a little sore, but by the next day they would feel good. And they were just going to give up some of their blood. So once they had that explained, they understood. But I am constantly moved by donors who, even with these misconceptions of this, terrible procedure they think they're going to go through, are still willing to donate. And that just moves me. And then when they find out it's actually quite easy and nothing like they thought it was going to be, it's a pleasant surprise. prize. So I help locate that donor for the patient and get that all kind of figured out. Sometimes it can be quite a roller coaster trying to coordinate that, especially with unrelated donors, because we're working with people's schedules and the donor center's schedule and making sure everyone is safe to donate. The other thing is we want to make sure that it's safe for our donors. The procedure doesn't have any ill effects for them, and that they don't have any infections they might pass on to the patient. So all of that process is what I aid with, basically.
Part of that process too is when you tell a parent that you have a match.
Yes, and I actually just got to do that this morning. We had a patient who's referred to us and will be coming to transplant in about a month, and we've been trying to locate a donor for them, and we were able to do that. So I was able to tell that family this morning, good news, we've got some donors lined up for you. So when your child's ready, then we're ready. So that's always a good thing to say.
That's awesome. And I'm looking at Kevin over here, and if you look at Kevin, you would never think that he was sick. So Dr. Mensah, tell us about the results of a bone marrow transplant, how effective it is.
In particular reference to patients with blood cancers, some of them whom I would classify as having poor risk disease or disease that ultimately needs a transplant for them to have any chance of cure. Getting a bone marrow transplant means life or death. And the goal of that transplanted hematopoietic stem cells is two. That is, one, to get rid of any residual leukemia in their bone marrow or lymphoma, whichever one you're treating, and by a process called graft versus leukemia effect or graft versus tumor effect, and also to regenerate a new hematopoietic system in the patient. And so it is really critical that patients with poor risk disease get this procedure. Otherwise, we are looking at maybe trying to treat them with some amount of chemotherapy or other forms of therapy to control the disease a little bit, but ultimately such patients do pass away. And so giving your stem cells to somebody actually means giving them a second chance at life, and it's absolutely critical. And that is why I would never stop advocating that if you can, and I think most people can, get on the registry and be a donor, because you probably are the answer to somebody getting a second chance at life.
That's awesome. And Katherine was just describing the process and how people have misconceptions and they think they're maybe donating a bone or something else. But the way I heard Katherine describe it, it almost sounds like you're just going to give blood at a blood donation. And so, Cody, maybe you can tell us a little bit more. Is it like that?
Yeah, I mean, I went into the Carter Blood Care, sat in a big recliner chair that was pretty comfortable. And I mean, they put a needle in your left arm. Blood goes into a machine. The machine's making all sorts of noises, extracting the stem cells that it needs, and then it just, they re-inject the blood back into your right arm. It sounds like a big ordeal, but all you have to do is, I sat in the chair for 5 hours. I had family and friends come visit me and spend time with me. The time really flew by. And then all of a sudden the nurse comes in and says, okay, you're done.
Awesome. So Sneha, tell us about what somebody maybe who's watching and is interested and maybe wants to be on that registry. How do we get on this registry?
If you are interested in a bone marrow or stem cell donor, the process is very easy, very quick, and very simple. You can go to DKMS.org and request a free swab kit, which will be mailed to your home. The instructions are very clear, and it takes just a few minutes to swab the inside of your cheek with what essentially looks like a Q-tip. You drop the swabs back in the envelope. There is a prepaid stamp already on there We never want there to be any sort of financial barrier to anybody who is interested to register. So for any of our volunteers or anybody who is willing to register, DKMS covers all costs. You mail that back to DKMS, and within 6 to 8 weeks, you'll receive your donor ID card in the mail. You are on the registry up until the age of 61. So like Cody mentioned, he got the phone call saying that he matched with somebody after 3 years. It was the same exact for me. About 3 years later, I got a phone call saying that I matched with a woman diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. But we do have donors on the database who are in the registry for 12 and 15 years who end up even forgetting that they registered, because that's how truly simple the process is, and then find out that they ended up matching with the patient. So the process is actually very different. The process itself is very similar to donating platelets or plasma, but when you register to be a bone marrow or stem cell donor, there's actually only a 1% chance that you'll end up matching with the patient, because you do have to be a near perfect genetic match with that patient in need. So being on the registry, becoming a bone marrow or stem cell donor provides so much hope to all the patients, the 16,000 patients each year that are in search of a matching donor.
Yeah, and what I think is so awesome about it too, and we see stories like this, is that somebody goes to be a donor because they want to help somebody in their community. Somebody in their community has a cancer and they need a, so they have a drive and people step up. And a lot of times they don't match for that person, but then they find out they're a match for somebody else, and it could be somebody on the other side of the globe. And they're not maybe saving their friend, but they're saving somebody else, and maybe somebody else from around the world saves that friend. So it's kind of this great kind of community to be in.
And, for my case, I did donate to somebody who was living in a different country. So it was just really incredible to see, after the stem cells were collected and we had that bag all filled up, there was a courier actually there with an icebox who took the stem cells and hurried off to the airport to directly provide those stem cells to the medical team and to the patient in need. So it's just absolutely incredible to have a global network, that is truly very interconnected, as far apart as we all seem.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about how a lot of times family members are matched because of genetics and whatever. But what about people from two different countries, doctor, and people who've never met on different sides of the globe? What are the chances of somebody like that being a perfect match for somebody, in a totally different country?
So the chances are pretty small, but at that point in time, I'll tell you what, when you're the patient, and I've not been the patient, but I've seen many patients. When you're the patient, you will take any chance. And so we welcome anybody who would, jump on the registry to give any patient, even if it's 1% chance, if it's 0.5, we'll take it at that point in time. And people do find matches in different countries that are surprising and from different people. One of the most surprising cases that I've come across was when I was doing a donor search with a coordinator at a different institution. And we had a patient who was Caucasian who needed a bone marrow transplant so bad. And we did the search, and we're actually looking at Caucasians on the registry, and there was no match. And this donor search expert was like, you know what, let me just expand it. And she just expanded it to all. And actually, this person actually ended up having 3 donors. All the 3 donors were actually people of color. And it was one of the most shocking things that I had seen, because typically you don't expect that to happen. And so you can be a donor to help anybody. And whatever chance it is, I think it's worth it, because it changes a person's life, it changes a family, it changes a generation. Seeing a young person die and leave behind their family with little children is one of the most heartbreaking things that you can see. And also, one of the most gratifying things is when you find a match and the patient is cured and they have a second chance of life and they can have their family again, is one of the most gratifying things that you can see. So, these things do happen. And again, it's also, I want to add that it's harder for people of mixed or diverse heritage to find a match on the registry because HLA is what we use in typing, and it's usually inherited. And sometimes people from similar backgrounds are a better match than people from different backgrounds. And underrepresentation of communities of color and individuals with diverse backgrounds actually makes it harder for ethnically diverse patients to have a match. Caucasians would have like a 69% chance if you put it in the registry of finding an unrelated donor versus 6% for somebody of an African American background or a person of color, mixed background. And so if we talk about inequities or inequities in health or health disparities, whichever way you want to look at it, it also would be helpful if communities of color and people with diverse background will step up and become donors in order to help other people. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the Caribbean, you could help somebody in the United States. You could be in Africa and you help somebody in Asia. So it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in Germany and you would help somebody in a different part of the world. And so we are encouraging everybody to step up to make it easier for people with leukemia to have a second chance at life.
So just to take away from what you just said.
Sorry. Do you mind if I just interject on that a little bit?
Go ahead.
I really appreciate what Dr. Mensah said and the topic he brought up about diversity on the registry. I know that's something that DKMS is really focused on. And for me, as the kind of go-between the patient and the donor experience, and in pediatrics, we do see a lot of patients with bone marrow cancers that need transplants, but we also have a lot of patients with hematologic disorders like sickle cell disease that need a transplant for cure. And in the sickle cell population, the vast majority of these patients are from African descent, African Americans, Africans that have moved to the US. And finding a donor for that patient is difficult, and it's tragic when I cannot offer them a good donor. And we want a particularly good donor for this population because we want their quality of life to be really good after they get this transplant, to not only save their life, but give them good quality of life. And so there's an extreme need for these patients with diverse backgrounds. And I appreciate that DKMS is really focusing on recruiting in some countries that have previously not had that same effort around the world. And I think that's going to make a big difference for these patients.
Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. I would assume, just like when we're talking about a numbers game, the more people we have in that registry, the more people that are in that database, it's going to help everybody.
Absolutely. I'm so glad Dr. Mensah touched on how essential it is for us to reach communities of color, to educate and engage, and just let everybody across the world know that they have the potential to save somebody else's life. And often the patient in need, comes from a community from the donor. So, it is very unfortunate and something that DKMS is highly focused on, engaging the African American, Asian, Native American populations to ensure that we can provide better opportunities for those patients in need.
Cody had mentioned the process of being a donor, how simple that is, but to be on the registries is the simplest thing in the world, right? Because what we're talking about, just a little quick little Q-tip in your mouth. Is that what it is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, and that's exactly what it is. It's just a Q-tip in the mouth for a few minutes, and it's essentially the same motion as brushing your cheek, brushing your teeth, but on the inside of your cheek. And it truly does take just a few minutes and provide so much hope for the thousands of patients that are in need.
So somebody did this with a Q-tip. did it inside their cheek, and now Kevin is got
Yeah,
a new life, right? I mean,
that's
is it,
right.
how awesome is that?
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Um, yeah, no, it was great. And actually, to kind of piggyback off that story, I did my own bone marrow drive within my community, and because I also coach swimming, I kind of was able to reach out a little bit further into the swimming community as well. And I had one of my swimmers' boyfriends come out and do a cheek swab as well. And I just heard 2 weeks ago that they got a call that they were a match for somebody else. So, something is as easy, right? Yeah, I know. That's fantastic. So something as easy, as simple as just coming in, doing a cheek swab, being on the registry, and then they were so elated when they found out that he was going to be a match for somebody and that he was going to be able to save somebody's life. And it is just something that I don't even look at my situation and what I went through as something that was, super tragic. I don't know. I think it's interesting when you go through that process that I just had this outlook of, actually, funny thing, call me crazy, but I felt pretty blessed because of all the people, like the doctors, like the nurses, like the specialists, like the organizers who are out there for full support of me, and all the donors that came forth. The outreach of messages and emails and phone calls that I received as well. And so I never really had this super dire outlook on life, and maybe that's just me in general. But I just felt really blessed and loved by everybody. So, it is a special process. It's something that's really cool to be part of. And, I think getting out there and just doing a simple cheek swab just to get on that registry and boost those numbers up, because we need so many more people out there to register and be potential matches. With only 11 million, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. There's too many healthy people out there that could be matches for other people. And we just need to raise that awareness, get people out there, swab a cheek. That's all it takes.
That's awesome. I think that's a perfect segue into the little video. We want to play a video right now. So I think that's the perfect segue.
You never feel like your spouse is going to be the one to get that rare type of blood cancer, any type of cancer illness.
Had never heard of it. Even the hospital where he was at, they had told us that they really didn't have a lot of knowledge of aplastic anemia, that they would probably need to send him somewhere else.
When we first found out that he was being transferred to UVA, that was very emotional. Mm-hmm. Actually stopped at a local church, had prayer on the steps.
12 o'clock at night.
Just because, feeling that we was going to lose my son.
Floored, didn't know what was going to happen.
It was scary because he's always been more like my kid too, because I'm 5 years older, so I was his first babysitter, and it was scary.
It's like 5 things they look for, but they will accept a 3. And there was like 30 plus in the system. Every one of them, one after one, declined.
We had a couple donors that backed out, wouldn't do the way they wanted to first proceed and to do the transplant.
I told Dalton, I said, don't worry, it's going to happen. They will find a match. It's got to happen. Well, Dalton had came out and he said, Mom, they found a match. And it's a 5 out of 5. I was like, oh my gosh.
In January of 2013, my son, the school he was attending, was having a donor drive to benefit a child that was ill. It had been so long since I had registered, I had to ask him, okay, who is this? What is this about? I was excited about it.
I was excited for him. I think just because of the fact that you never know whose life you're going to change. My husband losing his mom when he was 21 with breast cancer, and I think losing a parent has got to be really hard, but knowing that these children will have their dad there for them is a huge factor for me today, just in knowing that it came full circle.
Almost 2 years in the making. I'm excited. I'm excited to meet the family and excited to meet him and hear his story. I'll just tell him how happy I am for him that he's, been made well through this. Hey, Dalton. Hey, brother.
Appreciate you.
I think the doctors had told you they would go with a 3 out of 5 match.
Yeah, and we're a 5 out of 5.
And I was a 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to believe.
I was like,
Had my last doctor's appointment.
I said he must
They
have
done
it right.
my test. It was 99%. I took 99%.
Mhm.
Wow.
So good to finally meet him. Been waiting for this. This has been 2 years in the making. From the first time I was contacted by a DKMS representative that I was a potential match. So that was back in June of 2019. And here we are almost, May of 2021. It's just been really good to finally meet him and see that he's doing okay and he's done so well with it.
Oh, it's amazing that you have people out there that are willing to take time and in fact sacrifice parts of their body to help someone at a second chance of life.
Troy's our angel. He is.
And everybody just that can be a donor, please follow up and be a donor.
Donate. I mean, you can save a life. Dalton's getting to spend time with us. He's getting to watch his son grow up and everything because of our angel that was sent to us, Troy. And just donate.
The probability of a family member being a match for someone in their family is only about 70% chance of not happening. So 30% chance of you actually helping someone in your family. So it's even more important to register because the likelihood of you helping someone in your family is so low.
It just takes, a swab and send it back in the mail and you could save somebody's life.
Awesome. Cody, how do you feel seeing that video?
It almost feels like a flashback to when I had the opportunity to meet my recipient. Just overwhelmed with emotion. There's no other way to really explain it. On top of getting the opportunity to save the person's life, it's also kind of weird standing next to somebody who you're pretty close to 100% DNA match with. So it's been, let's see, 2 years since I met Max. 3 years since I met Max, or 2 years since I met Max. So he's, since the procedure, he's had the ability to. He's had 3 anniversaries with his wife. He's had 3 Christmases with his family and countless birthdays. So you can't really beat knowing that you kind of helped to make that happen. So.
It's awesome. So awesome.
Adding on to what Cody just said, it is honestly very, very incredible to see the relationships that are built from, the patient-donor relationship. We've seen patients attend weddings of donors and become lifelong friends. So it's truly incredible to see all that comes out in the long term as well.
Awesome. Kevin, did you get a chance to meet your donor?
Well, he was my brother, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it's exactly what we're talking about with how easy it is to be a donor and what you need to do to get on the registry. Because when we initially went through the registry, I had 396 people that were, we used a scale of a 9 out of 10. And it was a 9 out of 10 match. And my doctors were just not comfortable with the markers that were matching for me to go ahead and proceed with any one of those people. And so there was about a 2-week stretch there where we didn't know what we were going to do. And the outlook was looking more like, okay, 2 to 3 years of extended chemotherapy and, just waiting and waiting and waiting. When they went back and they looked again at my brother, that's what they decided to do, is just go with it. And of course, when you're in that situation, you put a lot of trust in God, you put a lot of trust in your doctors. And we went with my brother, who was only just call it a half match, but matched on the right markers. And thank God and thank science and thank everybody for all of that, to happen for me, because yeah, I'm here and I'm doing great. And it's been over a year now. I had it back in February of 2020. So surreal process of getting that donor blood put in and having a second birthday. And, it's a really cool experience. And then I was out of the hospital about 25 days later, released, and, well wishes and saying, hey, okay, go live your life. And so, every day now I'm on social media and I'm posting about, life after cancer, because there is such a thing. And so I just try to give as much hope to people as I possibly can, give them that positive outlook, because there's something to be said about that. But I think, the positive outlook for other people that aren't going through that process as well, to be able to get on that registry and just really feel like they can make a difference in somebody else's life.
Yeah. And what would you say to people who are waiting, like who are still trying to find that match? What encouragement would you give them?
I would just say stay as positive as you possibly can. I would say that your doctors and your nurses are taking care of you. I would say that, find some things in your life that you really want to fight for. I think for me from the beginning, and that's why I said I felt pretty blessed, is because I had so many people reach out to me and tell me that they love me and tell me that they're supporting me. And I had my family surrounding me the entire time. I just had a lot of different things going on in my life at the time where I just felt like I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat this. From day one, I kind of thought that. I mean, obviously, I cried and I, was, why is this happening? And you kind of go through those things. But as quickly as that happened, I quickly turned the mental strategy into positive thinking, and I'm going to beat this thing. And so I really believe that helped a tremendous amount as well. I mean, there's science behind a lot of stuff, but there's also something that, the internal drive that people have to want to overcome whatever's going on in their life is something that can't be quantified. So, for me, it was just that initial thought of, this is not gonna take me down. So I kept fighting, as dire as it was and as bad as I felt through the whole process, that I knew something was going to happen, and sure enough, it did.
But Katherine, what would you say to somebody, because you see so many children who get a second chance at life because of this? What would you say to somebody who's on the fence about registering?
Like so many donors have told me before, and like I think Cody was describing, it's a once in a lifetime, such a significant and important moment for the donor. They generally express just an overwhelming, sense of excitement and gratitude that they get a chance to save someone's life. If you think about it, it's not often most people get a chance to save someone's life. And so here's a way that you could do that for the world. And in kind, if you had a similar problem, you would want that for yourself, to have someone who is willing to donate. But I would say, if you're considering being a donor, but you are only thinking of one person, maybe that that the chances that you would be the donor for that one specific person is very low. So that when you are considering being on that registry, you need to have the mindset that I'm willing to donate to anyone who needs it. Because most likely, if you're chosen as a donor, it would be for someone you've never met. But that doesn't mean that their need and their family's need isn't just as great as the person that and that you can have a huge impact on that person. But I also just kind of talk to the practical side of things, not just the heartstrings, although that is important. DKMS does incredible things to make it possible for donors to donate. They work with your employer, they work with covering costs that you might incur from the donation process. So don't let that stress you out. When it comes down to it, they're going to make sure any barrier that's there for you, they will do their very best to overcome it with you. So just don't be worried about how that process is going to happen for you, because they're going to help you.
That's awesome, and that's a great point. And we're going to give a little, when we're about to wrap, we're going to give a little more information about how you can join that registry and how you can find more information about this. But before we wrap, does anybody else want to add anything else, want to say anything that we didn't get to cover?
DKMS has registered over 10 million people across the world, including all 7 of our DKMS entities.
Awesome.
So just and thank you also, Katherine, for mentioning all that DKMS does. We do our best to make sure that the entire process for the donor is as seamless as possible. If you do have questions and you are unsure if you want to donate, ask those questions, get informed, reach out to DKMS. We'll be more than happy to connect you with the donor so you can understand exactly how easy and simple that process truly is. And like Katherine mentioned, we do everything that we can to overcome any possible barrier that you may have. We all have so much power within us. We have the power to save somebody's life. I know a lot of us are organ donors and blood donors, and we think that we can save somebody's lives in those ways, but this is something that you can do over the span of a few days and ends up being a big part of who you are as a donor as well.
Awesome. I want to add some closing words, and I just want to say that bone marrow transplant can be life-saving for the treatment of blood cancers and so many other diseases. And I'm extremely proud of what DKMS is doing and trying to expand that donor registry. We are stronger together. And if a lot of us get on the registry, we would make life better for everybody. So I would urge you, wherever you are, become a donor now, save a life tomorrow, particularly for communities of color. And I'm extremely proud also of what DKMS is doing to expand donor access and registries to Africa and to Asia as well. And I would urge people of color to join the registry. Please don't believe the wild stories in the communities regarding the fact that somebody's going to take your organ. Take it from me, it's not correct. You can donate and you can live a fruitful life with no problems whatsoever. Thank you.
Awesome.
One thing I'd like to say on that note as well is that I think through this pandemic, which has been pretty crazy throughout the whole world, I think one of the things that we're finding out is how much we need each other as people, as a human race. And so I would say in the same thing that Dr. Mensah said is step up, be a donor. It's a super easy process just to get your cheek swabbed. You're on the registry. And if you do happen to get that call, you will be a lifesaver. So please, on the DKMS website, register, become a donor, and save somebody's life, because it can happen and you can save somebody's life. I'm living proof. And so please do it. Do it tomorrow. Make that registry happen. Blow it up. Make it as big as possible so that we can save more people that get diagnosed with cancer and diagnosed with those diseases that need a bone marrow transplant.
Awesome.
I do want to add a few more things. So Kevin mentioned that when sharing his story, there were quite a few people that ended up registering and becoming bone marrow and stem cell donors. And because of those efforts, there were actually 2 people that ended up going on to donate to help 2 other patients in need. So, every registration matters, every donor matters, and every donor has the potential to save someone else's life. And I do want to add one more thing. This World Blood Cancer Day, we stand in solidarity with every single blood cancer and blood disease patient, and we are there to support you and be there with you on behalf of the entire DKMS community.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and giving us your firsthand experiences with bone marrow and blood stem cell transplantation. Now it's a time. So, just that we were talking about before, some more information here. The World Blood Cancer Day, you can make your mark. All it takes is all of us to sign up now. And you can do that at dkms.org. /WBCD. So it's dkms.org/WBCD. We could all make a difference. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.